Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Meghan Kerner. Gosh, let's see if I can say the name right off the bat there. And we're going to be talking about balance, commitment, and bravery for modern business wins. And in today's episode, we'll look at how you can balance your inner male and female for way more business joy and balance. Why self-commitment to your intuition is key for modern business success. Why smart entrepreneurs are constantly being intuitively guided. And we'll examine the courage of intuition versus the courage of your ego. So welcome, Meghan.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad you're joining us here. And just for those of you who don't know, Meghan is a feminine business coach, and she helps mentor people who want to deepen their practice of listening to their heart, soul, inner wisdom, whatever you want to call it, as they build their businesses and journey through life. So when you said feminine business coach, what exactly does that mean? I've never heard that term before, so and maybe the audience haven't
maybe
either.
I made it up. You know, when I started my journey as an entrepreneur, the common wisdom out there was kind of like, do whatever it takes. And what I saw in my own life and in the lives of many people around me, taking on this really dominant masculine paradigm, is that you get burnt out. You have health challenges. You may gain weight. For me, it was infertility for several years. And I was chronically fatigued. I think almost everyone in our culture who works really hard experiences adrenal fatigue at one point or another. And for me, it led to a burnout, a deep burnout after that first business. At the same time, I had become a mother. I'd finally conceived only when I started to slow down and listen to my body and listen to my intuition and have a balance of a being and doing sort of business. And I just see people who get so burnt out that they almost have to check out for a year or maybe more. You know, just the burnout is so rampant in our society that I think that the traditional business coaching of do whatever it takes, it doesn't really work for a lot of women. And so I want to introduce this new business model, which is more about tuning into what feels right for you, tuning into what you actually enjoy doing, versus blindly following someone who tells you, oh, just because you're in business, you know, you need to have all of these social media accounts, they all need to be active, you need an email list, you need a funnel. But it doesn't have to be that difficult. You can have a really simple business model and find success, but it's all about defining, what does success mean to you? What does it look like?
I'm not convinced that doing model works for men either.
I totally agree. I don't think it works for any gender being. But it is the dominant paradigm in our culture. And I was just watching a video by Jordan Peterson, who's a professor at a university up in Canada, who was saying, you know, that it's interesting that his understanding is that some men may be biologically or temperamentally driven to really work 80 to 100 hours a week, and they do achieve great success. And in some ways that may set the bar for our culture and for our world culture. And unfortunately, very few people are set for that. So unfortunately, we're all running on this treadmill trying to keep up with maybe a handful of people who are truly able to manage that without breaking down mentally or emotionally or breaking down relationships or having that health breakdown. So I just find that very interesting. When I heard that, I was like, wow, it seems to be true. Very few people can keep up with that pace, that frenetic pace.
Well, and I don't think anyone really can. I mean, people can do it for a limited amount of time.
Right.
And that limited amount of time is different for different people. For some people, it might be a month. For others, it might be a year or 10 years. I mean, why do you think so many male entrepreneurs keel over from strokes and heart attacks in their 50s, you know, because they've been go. Right. Really, they could have another, 50 years of productivity and joy. But they, they didn't, they burned out.
So exactly what you're saying, I think it's so important to take a look at, what do you value as an individual? And for some people, it could be that the safety and security that they think money will bring them is what they're driving for. But for many people, relationships are most important. really, truly relationships, or maybe it's just the simple pleasures of life, or maybe it's having a family, or contributing in some way that maybe isn't going to make you a worldwide household name, but you're reaching the people that you want to reach, that you're meant to reach. So I just really encourage everyone to tune into, what do you really value, and building your business around that versus what someone else defines as successful.
I think that's a great point. What is important to you, and to find that out, you can't be around other people or other influences. You've got to, for me, I have to be having time alone to figure out what's important to me. Otherwise, right. I just get other people's ideas of what should be important for me.
Right. And there's, with social media and with the way the world works today, everyone is shouting. Everyone is shouting their opinion, and these can be people that you love, admire, respect, are entertained by. It's very easy to take on their point of view, especially when people are good at, arguing their point, or they're great writers. It's really easy to think, I should be doing what that person says to do. And if you're not in tune with your inner wisdom, if you're not in tune with your own values, if you're not in tune with your own perspective on the world, your unique perspective, you'll be swayed off course. It's really easy to be swayed in this world, which brings up the importance of having some sort of practice to come back to yourself. What does that look like?
What does that look like for you?
So for me, what I have found through trying everything is that it's different every single day. I wish that I could say that there is some sort of routine, and I even started 6 months ago, 9 months ago, trying to outline some sort of choose your own pleasure connection ritual in the morning, where I would outline, like, these are all the options. You could dance, you could journal, you could meditate, you could do yoga, you could go for a run outside, you could put your feet on the ground, And what it came down to, and I thought in my mind, like, just pick 3 every day. Do gratitude, sort of ritual. What it came down to is that the rituality of it took away the magic. And that was hard for me to come to terms with, that it truly relies on me slowing down. It just relies on me slowing down, noticing, am I connected at all to myself right now? And then listening to, what do you think I should do? It's almost like talking to your intuition before you connect it to your intuition. And I usually get a hit, go walk to a park, or walk down the street with your coffee and just see where that takes you, or this morning you should write, or this morning you should dance outside, whatever it is. And it's never the same. And there's a part of my ego mind that has a lot of trouble with that, because I was really hoping for, like, the magic bullet that I think we're all hoping for in every situation. We all want a magic bullet for marketing, and a magic bullet for copywriting, and a magic bullet for the perfect business plan. When I think in this new paradigm of business that is coming up for a lot of people right now who are entrepreneurs and business owners, it's about really listening to yourself across the board. So where you might, yes, reach out to someone to coach or mentor you, you might take a course on copywriting. At the end of the day, everything is coming back to yourself, asking, is this right for me? And so it is challenging for my ego mind to think, like, oh, there's no magic bullet. I can't just meditate for 20 minutes a day. That really worked for that guy that I follow, and he seems so happy. But for me personally, it's a tuning in every day and multiple times a day. Yeah.
That's a great insight there, that while all those practices you mentioned are good things, and I don't think I can't imagine any of them really being harmful to you or connected to your intuition. They may not be the thing that's going to connect you the fastest today. So, and I have a question for the audience they can ask themselves here, which is, what would it take for me to be connected with my intuition right now?
Right. That's a beautiful question.
Because the what would it take helps you access your intuitive mind. And that's something you could ask yourself in the morning or at any point during the day.
Right.
So,
and it can be the simplest answer, that's the beauty of that question. I love that.
Yes. It doesn't require any doing necessarily.
Right. Right. It might be take a nap.
Could be take a nap or blow some bubble gum or
Yeah.
call an old friend or take a deep breath or
Right.
stretch or, could be any number of things.
Right. Right.
So you talked a little bit about getting into a path of joy and ease, and that's just the antithesis of the hustle, stay busy,
Right.
struggle kind of entrepreneur journey that so many business leaders are on. Why do you think that's important now for entrepreneurs to be focusing on their joy and ease?
Well, I feel like I can speak to it because I was in the hustle mode for so many years. So whether it was in a traditional corporate setting, where I would always raise my hand like, oh, you just fired someone? Well, I'll take on their work. I'll do double work. No problem, That sort of go, hustle, hustle, hustle. I'll get it all done. Or in my first business, I felt the same way. I felt like I had to work 100 hours a week as an entrepreneur because you never know where your paycheck is coming from. You're constantly, networking and meeting with people and learning new things, and it burns you out. It just burns you out. And looking back, because hindsight is always 20/20, I can see that there are a lot of instances where it would have been more productive for me to just take a break. It would have been more productive for me to ask, what would it take to connect with myself? And because, this was starting in 2009 with that business, I wasn't in the same place in my relationship to myself. I don't even think I knew that that was an option back then. So for me personally, it took that experience to be able to see it and say, I don't want to do that again. And in fact, I'm looking for a new model for myself where I have balance. I feel good. I'm enjoying this business to the point where I will continue on no matter what happens. I evolve this business no matter what happens because it feels good. It feels on purpose. It's a match for my values. And it's a match for what I want to bring into the world.
So you had a social media marketing business?
It was mostly search engine optimization, keyword research, website optimization, which anyone who works in that field knows it's dead. So it's all about, paid advertising and social now. But at the time, it was a great business model. But it didn't bring me the joy that I needed when I asked myself the question, what's the most compelling thing I can do? I felt really called to be present with my daughter, who was 2 years old at the time. And I didn't feel compelled to rebuild a business with a new product and a new service offering and a new team. And so that's why I decided to close it. And I think also it was the burnout. It was the feeling like I needed to constantly be working. The entire business model just wasn't set up for a harmonious existence, in relationships, as a parent, as a woman. I just didn't have the time I needed for my own self-sanity. And
so how did you know you were burnt out or burning out?
I think that it's interesting when you look back, and it's hard to say if it was all just the business. I think that for years of acting and doing in a way that wasn't a match for my, let's say, constitution and who I am, that I would get sick all the time. For instance, I remember one of the years in business, I was sick for, I think, 6 to 9 months. And I only had that idea, like just coughing, constantly coughing, the sneezing, just that feeling. And I remember the timeline because a friend had a baby, and I felt like I couldn't see that baby for that 6 or 9 months because I was constantly having these cough attacks. And, it's just a symptom. It's an expression of health that something is off. And I love the idea of the term health expression. We always have an expression of health. And this comes from a friend, Dr. Sarah Kerner. She's a chiropractor in Australia. Sometimes our expression is healthy and vibrant and great. And sometimes it's the flu, or symptom where your body is shutting you down because you have to rest, you have to go inward. And in that case, there have been so many times in my life with these health expressions that were pointing in the direction of this is not working.
Mm. And for other people listening, that might be their health, or it might be something else in their life that the burnout shows up in.
Yeah.
Perhaps their relationships are not going well, or maybe their business is not doing financially well,
Right.
or maybe they just feel disconnected from spirit and depressed. You know, there are many ways that could come
Absolutely.
out. And you mentioned adrenal burnout earlier. Just for people who don't know, what exactly is an adrenal?
An adrenal. An adrenal is a tiny gland, I think on the top of your pancreas. Do you know?
Top of both kidneys.
Both kidneys, thank you.
Yeah.
But what it does is it's related to stress hormones. And so when you're constantly in a fight or flight mode, you're constantly firing these cortisol.
So that's where the adrenaline, hence adrenal gland, it comes from, or the cortisol, which is the opposite of adrenaline.
Oh, got it. So you'll see that I'm not a health coach. For me, when I think of adrenal burnout, I think of it in terms of being in that state of high stress. Some people say that stress can be good for you, but constantly feeling like I needed to perform to be valued is really, I mean, to put it in a very esoteric or maybe even a very deep way. And so I was constantly driven by wanting some sort of outside success to validate me. And that kept me running. It just kept me trying to have a bigger business, have more impact, have more clients, make more money. Then I'll finally be worthy in my business. You know, I'll be worthy in my life. And I think a lot of people are running in their lives, trying to impress those around them, their family, their friends, their high school, buddy. And I guess I just want to take a stand that you don't need to do that, and that you can slow down, and that everything will still be okay. Everything will work out. And oftentimes a simpler lifestyle and enjoying the simple pleasures of life brings you actually more satisfaction than, say, a pair of designer shoes or a fancy car or, buying a big house.
I sometimes think those designer shoes or whatever other little rewards we give ourselves they're almost like a Band-Aid to cover up the pain we have in our soul from the more money, more clients, more fame really doesn't satisfy our souls.
Right. Yeah. And just to take a minute for everyone just to hear that is important. It's so true. Everyone wakes up to that at a different point.
Yeah, or they don't wake up and they die and reincarnate, you know what I mean? It's all okay. But for people listening who would like to have a healthier, happier business and life, maybe taking some time right now today to recognize what simple pleasures do they have available to them now that they could enjoy more. Because it's so easy, I find, with simple pleasures, just, if I'm in a busy go mode, I don't even notice them,
Right. Right. And it's because you almost can't. The thing about simple pleasures is I feel like you need to be present and you need to be slow. You need to be mindful. And for instance, if you're driving from your house to a Starbucks to get, a double latte and a scone, and that's your simple pleasure, you're speeding by, let's say, the bird tweeting in the tree or the flowers that just bloomed. And it's hard to appreciate that when you're just rushing from one location to the next, from one destination to the next. It requires a slowing down. Let's say you can even be on the highway, but if your mind is slow, you'll be able to appreciate, the things that are coming up for you and those simple pleasures.
Well, and I don't drive as much these days because I sold my car a while ago. Gosh, more than 5 years now. But when I do rent a car, because I'm in a country that, you just can't take a train or whatever to get somewhere. If I'm doing well, if I have connected to my intuition or done whatever practice came to me, I can just be pretty meditative on the highway. And if someone cuts in front of me, it's like, I don't get all wound up.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, if I was rush, I'd be all excited and upset and probably pumping
Right.
adrenaline around those adrenal glands.
Yes, exactly. So that's a fascinating thing. You can be driving 80 miles an hour, but if you are present, if you're mindful, it's almost as if there's a force field around you of just peace. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes visualize that when I'm driving. And just to switch gears a bit, I think that can be true in the military when a soldier is in battle. The ones who are successful at being soldiers actually are very in the moment and present, and they just know to duck. And they don't know why they're ducking, but then the bullet comes by or the bomb drops or whatever. And then they realize
Wow.
afterwards why they've.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's very common in military situations in battle. Not in the military that, where they're all regimented and what have you, but when they're actually in the chaos of battle, being able to hear your intuition is key to surviving. So the same thing, I don't want to say business is a battle because I don't think it is, but there is a chaotic thing to modern business, and it's getting more chaotic and more technology and social and political change is happening right now. And that's why the old ways of just using your ego and rational mind don't work as well.
Right.
And I'm not saying, I think ego and rational mind are fun tools to use as well.
Right. I mean, we have to make friends with them. They're never going away.
But the intuition, and guidance is another tool that's valuable in business. And now is the time to, if you want to do well in your business, in traditional measures, but also in joy and happiness, I think it's key.
I think it's key too.
So the other thing I just want to say about adrenal burnout, I used to drink a lot of coffee, and that would be my way to kind of cover up my adrenals being burned out. I wouldn't have enough energy and I'd be down, but I'd drink a stimulant and then I could go for a bit more.
Right.
And I'm imagining some of the people listening do something like that. And then at the end of the day, guess what? I'd be like overstimulated, and I'd drink a bunch of alcohol to kind of calm down. And I'm not sure what the point I'm trying to make here is, but like if you're doing that, you might want to contemplate trying cutting it down or just doing without, because it's much easier to hear the intuition and not be damaging your body and to be able to hear the messages from your body. Because I honestly believe when we get sick, it's a message from our body.
I completely agree.
So maybe we can talk about that. So let's talk. You've made a commitment to your intuition, and you think that's important for modern business success. So tell us about your commitment to your intuition, and we'll talk more about how you may hear messages from it or not.
Sure. So what I've noticed really just recently, to be honest, is now I can clearly know when I'm connected. And what I mean by that is everything just seems to unfold really easily and magically. When you say, what would it take for this to feel super wonderful and easy? That's how I feel when I'm connected to my intuition, to my inner wisdom. It's almost like the solutions just drop into my hand, and I didn't have any ego mind involved in manufacturing that solution. And then I can also very easily tell now when I'm disconnected. And when I was talking about wanting to have some sort of routine that would make me connected, I would sometimes believe in the past that I was, but still things still felt like a fight. I was second guessing myself. And I think I second guessed myself in those moments because my ego was giving me solutions that my intuition knew were not the right solutions. So it becomes very subtle, this self-mastery and this cultivation of the relationship between you and inner wisdom. And so now I'm either in one of three states. I'm either connected, disconnected, or in the process of reconnecting, getting back to that place that feels so good. And it's a daily dance because, I have this spark of wisdom inside me, but I'm also human. I have to eat. I have to go to the bathroom. I have to, take out the trash. And that brings up all sorts sorts of stories in my ego mode. I should have to take out the trash anymore. But it's just kind of a funny little game we have here on Earth, where we have this opportunity to live in a way that feels so wonderful and so guided. And we also have the reality of these bodies and our human nature, our animalistic nature, our egos. So it's a dance. It's a dance.
So I'll list those 3 things: connected, disconnected, or reconnecting, in the show notes that you can find on the website for this episode. But I love how you're noticing throughout your day, am I connected or disconnected, or am I in the process of reconnecting? Because I'm just guessing when you start off this process, maybe most of the day you're disconnected. And
absolutely. And one thing that's interesting is there are days that I choose to be disconnected. And by that I mean, there are days that we have these stories running that are just like, that person, did something to me, or, I'm a victim, or, our ego loves to make up these stories to take away our power. And it can be really enticing. It can be very seductive to want to feel powerless sometimes, to feel like you can't make changes, or you're not in charge of your own inner world, at least. And it's been interesting to notice those days where it's like, I was feeling cranky this morning, and it's 3:00 and I'm still feeling cranky, and I have chosen to not reconnect with my inner wisdom, and to not reconnect with maybe those emotions, not really feel the emotions, so I can move forward and reconnect with myself. And, so I just say that because it's a very humbling experience to be human, I think, and to form a relationship between our inner wisdom and these brains, these minds that also want to run the show. So for me, it's taken a conscious effort to really love this ego mind that tries to tell me that I'm powerless, and that I have to do what other people tell me to do, and that's the only way to be successful, and my definition of success isn't real. So it's kind of a funny thing.
It is a funny thing, and I know for me it helps to take my consciousness out of my head. So if I imagine my consciousness in a little elevator, and it goes down my head, down my throat, heart, all the way to my hips, I have a very different experience. And even out of my body, I could have my consciousness go, if you do astral travel or whatever, you can have it go way out of your body. But even just a few feet out of my body feels very different. And then it's easier to be less identified with my ego mind, and almost think of it as like, if I had some young toddler saying, mommy, give me peanut butter now, or give me fame now, or whatever it is that the ego mind wants. I wouldn't get, if I was in a peaceful state, a toddler saying what they wanted would not, it's like, yes, dear, I love you, and let me contemplate that. And meanwhile, I'm going to do some other things.
I love that. And I love what you're saying about grounding down, like going down into your body makes it so much easier to reconnect. That's why all those processes of dance or walking on the earth, or running, or the physicality sometimes will bring you back to yourself.
It definitely can be good. And there are days where it's just better to like say, screw, I'm not doing in a good mood. I'm going to do more harm to my business than good. I should just take off.
Right. Right.
And call in sick, even though I'm not physically sick, I'm having a mental health day.
Yeah. And I think that more and more people are finding, either if they don't give themselves permission to take a break, to rest, to take a step back, then they're forced to. And that's always tough to deal with when, you do have a day off and then you have to lie in bed because you have, flu-like symptoms. That's no fun. It would be, it's always a lesson. Maybe I should have just, taken a break.
Take the days, take the time off proactively. It doesn't even have to be, if I take an hour off proactively, I don't have to spend a day being sick in bed.
Right.
And it's funny, when I'm in the flow, if I've like scheduled too many podcast interviews or meetings in a day, people just end up rescheduling. It's like
Fascinating, isn't it?
yes. So, and then I talked to them later, and they said, "Oh, yeah. So what a blessing it was that we didn't do that meeting that day because I was slammed with stuff." So
I love that. And I find it so fascinating when you are in flow and in your intuition, how the obstacles just kind of disappear,
Well, and I think there's an unwritten assumption of the hustle entrepreneur mindset that the more you do, the more gets done, or the more that's achieved. And it's just not true. It's quite possible to achieve a lot in your business without hustling. I mean, I'm not saying, sometimes action is important, but it doesn't have to be struggle.
Right. And, you have to take into account the 80-20 rule. And also now there's this concept of deep work that's coming up, which I think is a really important thing for people to think about. The ability to focus and get your key tasks done. Those things that will, the 20% of the work that brings in the 80% of the income. How can you focus on that versus just quote unquote hustling, which I think is mostly I'm going to work 80% more and bring in maybe 20% more income, but really hustle. Like, is that bringing you joy? Does that feel good? Are you taking care of yourself? I think that's really what, if people can take a moment and step back and just really look at, what are the income generating tasks in my business? And then let go of the things that you feel like you should be doing, that someone else told you have to do to hustle.
Well, and I think it actually goes negative. There are those 20% of tasks that bring us 80% of our income. And then there's a different 20% that bring us 80% of our joy. So,
That's I've never heard that, but I love that.
Yes. So, you may need to do more than 180-20 to get what you want if you want profit and joy.
Yeah.
But, and then you do that other, if you're hustling, you do that other 80% of the 40 hours in the week that produce another 20%, which is really not that great. But then people carry on and they work another 20 hours or another 40 hours. And at some point, it actually can become negative. They can end up so tired, they make mistakes and they have to redo the work, or they have a bad conversation with a potential client and it screws up the deal. Whereas if they'd been relaxed, they could have had an engaging, connectful conversation and close the sale. So, I think there's actually, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's quite possible there could be some of our work that actually has a negative impact.
Yeah. And you look at people in different industries who do get tired or make a mistake because they're overworked, or, they're just pushing too much. You look at our medical paradigm right now, doctors who are working, I think residents sometimes have 36 hours on. I mean, it's hard to not make a mistake if you have to stay awake and be saving lives actively for those hours. I mean,
there probably is a reason why doctors are one of the professions who are most use addictive drugs to deal with stress. Partly because they have access, but also they just have a stressful,
very stressful
job. So it's a little silly, really. I mean, it's great to have that muscle there to be able to do 36 hours straight if you have to, because if there's a terrible accident and the hospital's inundated with people, great, you can do it, but don't be doing it all the time. It's just it's not good for you, not good for your clients, not good for your health, bad for your relationships. So indeed. So tell us a bit about, speaking of relationships, tell us about your relationship to your intuition. Do you have a relationship with your intuition?
I do.
Does your husband know?
He supports it. As I have embraced my intuition and truly in being who I am, sometimes I think it can be hard to put a stake in the ground for intuition in a world that really values logic and double-blind scientific studies, and that's the truth. A lot of people value, say, scientific papers as the truth, the only truth out there. And intuition cannot be studied. It cannot be justified in a lot of ways. So for me, it took a lot of years to trust myself and to trust my intuition and to, let's say, honor it above the double-blind scientific study that tells me this is the way that I will be successful. So I do have a very strong commitment to myself now and to my intuition. And I let it guide me in all decisions, you know, from what I want to eat to what I want to wear to what to do in my business for the day. And it doesn't have to be a formalized question, but it's truly just one of those states. It's like, am I in flow? Then the answers just kind of come to me and I trust them. And, you know, it could even be as simple as a lot of people have read the book by Marie Kondo, The Magic Art of Tidying Up, or the Japanese Art of Tidying Up. And, you know, where you pick up one thing and you're like, does this bring me joy? And you feel it. Does it? Okay, I'll keep it. When I'm in flow, the answers are always yes, 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 this feels good. And when I'm out of flow and I'm disconnected, things just don't feel as easy. And so that's why I've learned to cultivate this relationship with my inner wisdom, because I prefer for it to feel good, to be honest. I prefer for it to feel good. And also when I'm in this state, if something doesn't feel good, because we live in this world where there are tragedies and there's drama and there's illness in so many ways and sickness. And when I'm in flow, I can more easily access my emotions, and I feel safe to feel angry or to feel sad or to feel grief, because I can sit with it. I have the courage and the confidence to know that feeling the feelings isn't going to take me out of the game for 6 months. Whereas I think in the past, I didn't want to feel the feelings, and so then I would feel a low-grade dullness or depression because I wasn't allowing myself to really feel emotions and process them. So by being in touch with my inner wisdom, I'm not afraid of feeling, you know, the whole range of human experience, which is a real gift for me personally.
Yeah, because emotions are just energy in motion if we let them be in motion. And if we suppress them, they turn into illnesses or pieces of our business that don't work well.
Right.
And that book, The Japanese Art of Tidying Up, and I'll put the thing in our show notes on that. And she was applying that to like your house or rooms, but
yeah, clutter clearing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. But I want to take it deeper than that, because we can apply it to our businesses. We can say, okay, here are all the different areas of our businesses. Here's the marketing department, the sales department. Even if I'm the one wearing those hats, you know, maybe I put on my little marketing hat and my sales hat. We still have those areas in our business, no matter what size they are. The accounting department, you know, the IT department, and taking that and examining not just the physical things, but like, is the system I'm using here, you know, do I love it, or does it need throwing out and redoing?
Right.
So, and then the same with all the people I work with, go through my entire client list. Okay, this client, do they need, you know, throwing out?
Are they not for me anymore?
And the same for all the staff and vendors I work with, examining each of those. Are they bringing me joy?
Right.
So
right.
There's a lot deeper wisdom there than just clutter clearing your home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, the beautiful thing about being in relationship with that question is it will change over time. You know, it always does for us. A book that was so important to me 5 years ago is one that I could, in some cases, could easily give away now, you know, because you're in a different place in your life. And so that's why I think it's important to keep asking that question.
Yeah, I had a collection of 3,000 books, and when I sold my house, I gave 80% of them away.
Wow.
So, because I got what I needed from them.
Yeah.
Though I must admit, I did take a digital photo of the bookshelves, so I had the spines of all the books, just in case I wanted to get one of them back.
Cool.
Not from where I'd given them to, but buy it back on Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I only did that, you know, I think I did that like 3 times in 5 years. You know?
Wow.
So really, I was pretty okay with what I let go. So what about people listening who are like have this belief that you either have intuition or you don't have it?
Wow, that's an interesting question. As someone who believes everyone has intuition, I guess that my advice or my point of view would be that I feel like the only way you can hear your intuition is when you're slow and quiet. And for me, the first time I ever heard my inner voice was when I walked a labyrinth. And this was back when I was in college. I might have been 20 or 21. And I had never quieted my mind before in my whole life. I think this was probably before the boom of yoga and meditation. But when I walked silently to the center of this prayer labyrinth that was set up for a week, in the center is where I finally heard my inner voice for the first time. I'm kind of like coming to tears with it because I had never heard that before. And it was such a sweet, loving voice. So I think that sometimes we have so many critical voices in our minds and these other parts of ourselves that are, telling you you're not good enough or driving you forward. I think that sometimes it takes that 15-minute walk, to a quiet point. And, I think they're called prayer labyrinths or meditative labyrinths all over the world. And so if you're someone who doesn't believe you have intuition or an inner voice that's gentle and loving and wants the best for you, then that might be a way to access it for the first time. And the other thing that helped me to hear my inner voice was Kundalini yoga meditation. And I don't know if you've ever practiced that, but instead
I have.
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah, every day for the last 8 years. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Something you didn't know about me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for me, it was such a breakthrough to not just sit still, but instead when I had a pose with my hands, or sometimes I was moving my hands in my body, sometimes I was rocking, there was a mantra, the teacher would play a music, a song with the mantra. And with all that motion and things to do, that quieted my mind. And that's when my intuition was able to come forward. So I think sometimes it's a misconception that you need to be perfectly still and not moving and that your mind will quiet. For me personally, I found it's much easier to access my intuition when I'm dancing, when I'm writing, when I'm walking.
I always take a journal with me when I go to one of these ecstatic dance things, because pretty often I'll come up with these amazing business and creative ideas during the dance.
Yes.
So I just kind of sneak to the corner, write them down, and then go back to dancing so I can get them out of my mind.
I feel the same way, and I love ecstatic dance. It's been such another healing modality for me. And again, when I'm in my body, that's when my intuition speaks to me. So for me, it's a lot about getting out of my head, the spinning of the stories in our mind, getting into the body and letting that wisdom arise from within. So if you don't believe in it, those are my tips.
and just a suggestion for people who are thinking of doing a labyrinth, or maybe just, if you don't have a labyrinth near for you, maybe you just go for a wander in a local park or a wood or whatever. Don't take your cell phone with you.
Yeah, that is a really good tip.
Because if you're constantly connecting with messages and vibrations or whatever, how can you get that 15 minutes of peace in order to get to connect with your intuition?
Right.
And I think that comes back to the go, being busy all the time. Part of the thing, if we're always busy, how can we hear our intuition? It's hard. Right.
And that the go also, I want to add on to it, is the taking in information, consuming information, whether it's scrolling through Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or just constantly being
fear of missing out, right?
Yeah, it's the fear of missing out. It's the radio coming at you. It's the TVs coming at you from every bar and restaurant and airport. It's hard to find a moment where you're not being bombarded with information and you're not taking in information, which is the opposite of letting wisdom come up from within you.
I mean, the conspiracy theorist in me might almost believe that certain elements in society are afraid that if people were in contact with their intuition, they wouldn't be able to control the sheeple. And so we better have TVs in the elevators and in the beauty salons and the bars and in the cars and everywhere.
Right. It's almost as if people, and maybe some people are afraid of what their inner wisdom is going to tell them to, you're in the wrong job, you're in the wrong relationship, it's time to move on, it's time to live on purpose in your life. That can be a really scary thing. And If you're unfamiliar with your intuition and you don't know that you only get one step at a time, it can be extremely scary for your ego mind, who is used to projecting, 50 years in the future. What am I going to do in retirement? How am I going to save enough money to survive in 50 years? It can be a huge shift in learning to trust yourself and trust that you have this part of you that knows how your journey will unfold and wants the best and highest good for you and for everyone around you. And learning how to trust it in small, simple ways might be an access point, an entry point, where you can start to trust yourself for the big decisions too. So
if smart entrepreneurs are constantly guided by an intuition, how would that play out? I mean, do you get a big message from your intuition when you're being guided, or you get smaller messages, or how's that work?
I think for me, I always get a very simple, clear, loving next step. And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with business, which is really interesting. It could be just the guidance to rest. It could be the guidance to not move forward with something yet. It could be the guidance to take a break. I feel like inner wisdom is usually very gentle, and it's also in alignment with, let's say, the speed of nature. And as we all know, the speed of nature is mostly pretty slow, thinking of grass growing, earth turning. And yes, sometimes there are explosive, powerful things that come, a volcano erupting or a tornado, but that's not the constant. In most of nature, things are unfolding in a really cyclical and pretty slow manner. So for me, learning to trust the small download, saying, why don't you take a break and not move forward on that yet? The next time I tune in with my intuition, it might be, okay, now it's time to write an article. Let's write about this. The next thing might be, oh, it's time to send out a message to your email list. And then by learning to trust those steps, when I get the download, let's say it's time to close your business, which is harder for people to accept, or it's time to retire that program or service you're offering, you can trust that, knowing that your intuition is going to bring you the solution and set you on your next course of action in a very gentle, loving way. But it's not like lightning strikes. It's more like a whisper comes up for me personally.
And that's if you're hearing the guidance regularly. If
right.
people are not hearing the guidance, I think it can be a lightning strike or a 2x4 hitting us around the head.
That's true. That's true. That's why I think cultivating a relationship with your intuition is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. If you can set aside time every day to do nothing, truly, if you just give yourself time that's unscheduled and see what arises. Do I want to go for a walk? Do I want to sit and have a cup of tea? Do I feel like pulling that book off the shelf that I've never read that I bought 5 years ago? When you give yourself that unstructured time, that's when the intuition can come up.
Scheduling unstructured time. That sounds so contradictory, doesn't it?
It's so contradictory, but in this world of go, 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 that's kind of the easiest step you could take, And that doesn't mean go to the gym and see what podcast comes up for you, because that's the opposite. And maybe in your unstructured time you would want to work out, but maybe you wouldn't. I feel like having that openness, creating small moments of openness. And, just, it doesn't have to be even 15 minutes. It can just be asking yourself throughout the day, what would it take for me to go my next step? I love that.
Yeah, and not scheduling your day back to back with meetings or tasks. And like you were saying earlier, pick the 20% of tasks that are going to give you 80% of the payoff and make sure you get those done, but don't fret over the other 80%.
Right. And it might be for you asking yourself, what marketing task can I let go of right now? I've worked with as a marketer, I've worked with so many businesses who said, well, we need to get our Twitter following up to, 1,000 people this month, and we need to get our Facebook followers up, and we got to get on Snapchat. And my point of view is always, well, what's the point? I mean, do you have some sort of next step for them to take? You're just running on a treadmill. And I think if people can ask themselves, like, what is actually bringing me results, and what do I enjoy, and what can I let go of for right now? You can always come back to those accounts. But to just keep running for no reason also is the detriment that you don't have that time to just connect with yourself in an unstructured way.
Mm. So let's talk about a C word, courage. So courage of intuition versus the courage of ego.
So this is something that just came up for me today, and it came up because I see so many people who are acting courageously, speaking out about what's important to them in the world right now. And sometimes as a small business owner, I think it can be scary to kind of put your stake in the ground and say, like, I stand for love, I stand for tolerance, I stand for equality, I stand for whatever is important to you in your life, truth. And in other ways, it can be about taking a leap in your life, not because you went to some sort of rah-rah seminar over the weekend that was like, you're bigger than this, you can do it, you should make $1 million. And I've been to those, and it's very motivating. Yeah, I'm gonna, start a business and quit my job. But coming from a place of trusting that you're on track and that it's safe for you to be who you are, I feel like the courage of intuition is about coming into alignment with who you are, and it's about self-actualization. Whereas the courage of ego is usually, at least in my life, it was about how can I make more money? How can I be famous? How can I have an impact on the world and be bigger than what I am now? It was a very different feel, and honestly, one is motivated by fear for me. The courage of ego is motivated by fear that I'm not enough if I don't make this much money. I'm not enough if I don't have this many clients. Whereas the courage of my intuition is all about love. It's about how can I make people know that I support them? How can I help people to know that it's okay to be who they are? How can I let people know that whatever has been happening so far doesn't work for me, and I want to create a different world? So it's a much, it's almost like coming from love or coming from fear.
Yeah, and if people listening are not sure whether they're coming from love or fear in this moment, in this business task they're doing or whatever, just notice if you feel contracted. Is your posture kind of hunched over, and you've got tension in your tummy, or whatever occurs for you when you have fear, or are you open and expansive? So, and that's a good first step, to being able to recognize whether you're coming from love or fear in the moment. And that relates back to being in that flow of joy and ease, because when I come from a space of love, I typically am in joy and ease.
Right.
Or I'm certainly more open to it.
Right. I mean, we all want to take action and solve problems out in the world. I mean, I think almost everyone has a point of view that they want to bring to life. But coming from a place of anger or fear, I feel like doesn't support the problem as much as if I can come back into myself, access my inner wisdom, access my unconditional love, and take action from that place. So it's a very subtle sort of energetic shift, but I really feel like it makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, all these wars on this, that, and the other that our governments put out really it's like having a war on for peace. It's kind of it's silly.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's got to be a more kind of Gandhi-esque shift. He wanted the British to leave India, but he didn't fight them.
Right.
And that was a genius move on his part. And it actually was more powerful. And it was impossible to defeat by traditional military means. They tried machine gunning hundreds of Indians and doing various other nasty things, and they lost. Because he had a more powerful, higher level approach.
Right.
It is interesting. Well, I'm certainly on a mission to help all entrepreneurs and business leaders to openly use their intuition. And I just think that's going to bring them more joy and profits and less stress, like we talked about in this episode. But I also think that if we're all making decisions in our businesses from our intuition as well as our egos, we're going to make less stupid decisions.
That's a very important point. Yeah.
Yeah, and by stupid decisions, I mean ones that hurt other people or hurt the
Right.
planet.
Right.
So, because a lot of businesses do things that hurt other people or they hurt the planet. And I'm not saying we wouldn't do any of those, but I think we'd make a darn sight less of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So, what would it take for us to do that, to openly use our intuition in all our businesses? That's a question for you, listener.
I was going to say, it seems like one we should all ask ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
What will it take?
Yeah. So if people wanted to find you online, Meghan, what would be good ways to do that?
You can visit my website, feminineintuition.com. You could find me on Facebook at Facebook/Meghan.Kerner, and it's MEGHANKERNER. I also have a Facebook group for Feminine Intuition, so you could find me at facebook.com/groups/Feminine Intuition. It's a private group, so you have to ask to be admitted, but feel free to do that, and I'd be happy to add you. Yeah, and that's one way to see what I'm doing on my website and get inspired to connect with your own intuition. You can watch me stumble through it. I make it look easy, I give people permission to fail and to look awkward and still find, the joy in life.
Wow, that's great. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast today, Meghan. And, great success, joy, and ease with your Feminine Intuition project.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure to connect and just to be in this space of possibility and encouragement for people. So thank you.